Okay, hello, my name is Gungrave. I'm just going to show you a video of all the new British tanks that have added 9.5. There's 5 new mediums and 6 new TDs. Most of the mediums are generally Lend-Lease tanks from the US. Much of them are quite similar to the US versions of them. You've got the M2, the Stuart 1.4, which I affectionately call the Stuart 14. You've got the Grant, which is named after Ulysses S. Grant, from who's the U.S. general during the Civil War. Which I find interesting, since the Lee is actually, which this thing is basically the same thing as, is named after General Lee, who led the South. But the British, for some reason, named this tank Grant, I guess in his honor. Then you've got the Sherman 3, which is the British counterpart to the M4, and the Sherman Firefly is basically an upgraded M4. Each tank is very similar, as I can show you in a second. USA. You got the M2 light tank. You got the M3 Stuart, M3 Lee. If this thing would hurry the hell up. And the British had the M3 Sherman for the Tier 5, just as the Americans have the M4 Sherman for Tier 5. The British, however, for this M4, their M4 Sherman is the Firefly, which is the Tier 6. Now, back to UK. M2. It's a scout. It's a light tank. It's very similar. Its guns aren't really that bad. Aren't really that great. Let's see. Research. It generally has it's basically almost the same as the American one. Going on to the Stuart 14, it's quite similar to its American counterpart. Not really much difference aside from having a 2-pounder gun. The Grant, similar to its American cousin too, but with the added benefit of getting a nice 6-pounder gun. The Sherman 3, kind of similar to its the M4, albeit though it gets a much larger selection of guns, 5 as opposed to the 3 that the M4 has in the American tree. And it has a pretty big selection of equipment you can unlock. Moving on to the Firefly, it has basically all the same things the M4 has, and better guns. It's more or less the Sherman 3 on steroids. Now, let's see, moving on to the Archer. Oh, by the way, the Archer, interesting enough, actually leads off from the Valentine. Now, the Archer, this TD, it's basically 6-pounder, 2 17-pounders. It is got a hell of a fire rate, and as you can see, the guns have some pretty beefy stats. I can imagine it's going to be pretty terrifying, albeit all these stats you're seeing on these guns are entirely test placeholder stats. They aren't what they're going to be in the game officially yet. So we'll find out in 2 weeks or so when they release the patch. Okay, to give you an idea before I go in detail. Here's the Archer. One thing I want to note about this thing, it kind of reminds you a little bit of some German designs in a way. But the most interesting part is you see the steel plate that goes around here. If you notice, there's actually the gun mallet that extends all the way around the front. Whether this will act as space armor, who knows? If it does, that will provide for some interesting gameplay. Okay, that's a Tier 5 TD. This is the Achilles. It's more or less similar to its I believe the Jackson. I think I gotta look that up. Oh, similar to the Wolverine. As you can see, it's let's see, USA. Go to the Wolverine. Of course, it's gonna take forever. I haven't bought any of the upgrades, so I don't have the top turret for this thing. But as you see, it's very similar to the Wolverine. Okay. Because again, this is another Lend-Lease tank. But this is where the Lend-Lease tanks stop. Moving on to the Tier 7 Challenger. From here on out, these tanks use basically the British medium hulls. See, like here, this uses the This uses the Cromwell hull, so does its Tier 8. Basically a longer version of the Cromwell hull. After that, the Conway and the FE45 Tier 10, they both use the Centurion hulls, I believe. Okay. Now, as you can see, the Tier 7 Challenger, it's got a very strange looking turret with the armor plate on top of it. I am not exactly sure what that is. Pretty simplistic. It looks like I'll just say it looks like a Cromwell on steroids. Now the Charioteer, this is where you start to get into the range of the big guns, as you can see. This thing has a Tier 10 gun, 105mm, 268 pin, 390 damage, and again, these are just test server stats. It's not going to be what the game's going to actually be. Moving on to the Conways, where we start to see the really ridiculously sized turrets. Take note that all of these new TDs have almost no armor. As you can see, it's crap for Tier 9 and 10. 132 is like something you only see maybe around in Tier 6. Okay, moving on to the Tier 10. As you can see, this thing is plain fucking ridiculously massive with a turret. And this is on a Centurion hull. By comparison, I'll show you the French ARL, stock French ARL. Now just watch. That's giving you an idea how big it is. Interestingly enough, on the back, this thing is so big they got a full door that you can walk in and stand up on this thing. Which I just find funny as hell. Now, anyways, let's get down to the breaking these things down and show you what kind of guns they have. Okay. Basically, Achilles 6-pounder, 217s. 17-pounders are pretty common among the TDs and a lot of the other tanks, because a lot of the British vehicles use 17 and 20-pounder guns. Again, 17-pounders for the Achilles. It's got the 3-inch gun. That's I believe that's the American one from the Wolverine. Pretty much all the engines and stuff are the same. Moving on to the Challenger. This is when we start getting more British equipment like Rolls-Royce engines. Still got the 17-pounders. The Charioteer is when we start getting the really good guns, the 20-pounders, like the B barrel, which makes the AT-7 a complete nightmare on the battlefield. And it gets the 105mm gun. Moving on to the Conway. It gets only one gun selection. Again, more British engines. Tier 10 gets the same gun as the Death Star, as you can see right here, the FV183. Okay. Now, the Archer, it's got generally crap armor. As you can see, 2020. PZ1C would have a good chance of penning this thing. Probably. Achilles, crap armor again. Just by comparison, I'll show you the Wolverine. Now watch. Keep your eye on the armor, turret and hull. The Wolverine's actually got better hull armor. So don't expect to take any hits in the Achilles. Moving on to the Cromwell extended hull TDs, we've got this nice little Challenger. It's got crap armor again. Interestingly enough, the rear of this thing has got 200 millimeters of armor. That I find strange. What I'd be really curious about is if you shoot the top of this thing, what will happen. Now, moving on to the Charioteer now. This one's got really crappy armor again. Conway, yeah, I don't expect to take any hits in the hull. And then the turret. The hull's got better armor than the turret. And lastly, basically what I call this is the FV405, which I call the FV45 just to keep it short. To give you an idea, this thing uses the same gun as the Death Star here. But obviously, this thing's much more mobile because it uses the Centurion hull. The only downside, it's still got the same limited gun traverse as the FV215B 183 Death Star. It's got almost no real armor to speak of. As you can see, 14. There's some lower tiers with better armor than this thing on the turret. Yeah, it's just laughable, as you can see. Overall, its key benefit is the mobility. It's to get in and out, fire its shot. Due to using the Centurion hull, its mobility is vastly superior to its cousin, the Death Star. But the downside is everything could pen this, and it's got waffle syndrome, where if somebody shoots HE at the turret, it will pen. 14 armor all around on the turret again, so it will fuck you up. Oh, that's all. Thanks for watching.